Welcome back to DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast, to our promised bonus episode in the gap we've got between Long Beach and the Indianapolis road course race, as we recap the 2 days of the Indy 500 Open Test, the first time that all drivers are out on the oval at Indianapolis in preparation for this year's 110th running of the Indianapolis 500, with 2 full days of running as drivers kind of get used to their cars a little bit and start their preparations towards this May's race. If you want a little bit of background to what the Open Test is all about and kind of the preparations of that, we had an interview with Connor Daly released earlier this week, so listen to that. Connor returns to the show. He's always great fun when he comes on the show. One of the most insightful drivers out there, I think, and one of the most entertaining to always listen to. And he gives some great insight there. So we would recommend listening to that once you get a chance. It's only half an hour, so but it's still packed full of information. So that's worth a listen to, because Connor will also be a big talking point of this episode, considering he topped the times at day 1 of testing. But yeah, we're going to recap the days of testing, going to speak about some of the kind of key moments or key highlights or key talking points. And at the end, we're going to be joined by HMD Motorsports team president Mike Maurini, who is co-running the number 11 entry for Katherine Legge, and has obviously got a great interest in the Indy 500, as well as a spotter's perspective, which is quite fun because I think most people don't hear from spotters, so it's interesting to hear a spotter's side of what goes on at the Open Test.
That's definitely worth sticking around for. I must say it was a really good conversation, as was the daily conversation, as you say, Dan. I think one of the more interesting things to come from that, from an Open Test perspective, was kind of just his insight on what they are really trying to gain from this, that actually, May is more for the refinements, but the Open Test is particularly important in terms of just finding a general direction, just making some of the bigger changes just to validate some of the work that goes on in the off season. So that was interesting and kind of reflects the fact that we shouldn't really read much into the times, as we are about to go and do, and list who was quick and who was not, when it doesn't really actually matter. And especially going towards May, a lot can change. Like, not all the drivers running their speedway cars either. So yeah, it's hard to read into this test, but it's also a really fun 2 days, just kind of very therapeutic, almost hypnotic, just watching cars going round and round and round. And yeah, just great to have them back on the speedway, and even more fun knowing that this time in 2 weeks we'll be there watching it.
Yeah, so as you mentioned about the times, Kara Collette topped the times, as we all expected. So our takeaway is Kara Collette is winning the Indy 500. No, not quite. I don't think that's good. Well, it could happen, but that would be quite a surprise. But Collette did top the times after having a monster tow ahead of Newgarden. Daly was third ahead of Pelot, Castro Neves, Pato Ward in sixth, Takuma Sato, Scott Dixon, David Malukas, and Alexander Rossi. Your top 10. Collette completed the most laps of 227. Mick Schumacher was the only other driver to complete over 200 laps. So busy couple of days for the rookies. If you didn't know, they went through what's called rookie orientation practice yesterday, Tuesday, because we're recording on Wednesday. Is basically have to pass a series of progressively increasing in speed phases so that they can get acclimatized to Indianapolis Oval and make sure they can run with everybody else, which everybody passed. So well done. I don't know if anybody's ever failed rookie orientation practice. That's a one for the IndyCar nerds out there. Let us know. Anyone have failed ROP? Did they get to really do it?
Just to note, by the way, those were the combined times from across the 2 days. It's also worth just looking at the no-tow results as well. It's very hard to, again, it's hard to read into any of this. And I guess the fact that Collette was quickest overall it at least speaks to the fact that, he's pretty confident already for a rookie on his first outing at the Speedway. The rookies actually all showed pretty well, I thought. Like, none of them looked particularly off the pace or anything. We'll get on to some of the comments Mick Schumacher made actually just after this. But yeah, in terms of no-tow, and I feel like you can't read everything as a no-tows until you've kind of got the qualifying boost. And ultimately, not all drivers were really putting emphasis on that. But Jack Harvey was actually quickest on the no-tow times from across both days. It was a really strong couple of test days for Dry and Reinbold Racing. Harvey was actually quickest on the no-tows on Tuesday as well, before going quickest again on that front on the Wednesday. He was ahead in the combined order of no-tows of Castro Neves, Kyle Kirkwood, Alexander Rossi, Felix Rosenqvist, Santino Ferrucci, Kiffin Simpson, Ed Carpenter, Connor Daly, and then Collette as well, showing all right when he was running solo. It is worth mentioning, actually, that Harvey and Dreyer and Reinbold's strong test there was a bit of a dampener late on Wednesday, because Harvey went up in one of the most dramatic plumes of smoke I've seen. I think he was kind of coming between turns 3 and 4, he was heading a pack of about 7 cars at that point. And yeah, just a massive cloud of smoke, a fire out the back of his car. And it was pretty fortuitous, really, that none of the cars behind him kind of ran into strife, because they would have been completely blinded. And yeah, thankfully everyone was okay from that situation, but it looked like some sort of catastrophic failure for Harvey. But happened late enough that they didn't lose out too much in terms of track time. But it's probably the most dramatic moment we had across the 2 days. None of the Sartor or Larson crashes from last year. The only other kind of driver-induced thing was Christian Rasmussen late on day 1 had a wheel nut come off or loose or something. There was a wheel loose, so he parked up off turn 2. But yeah, we had yellows for track inspections, and a lot of them are yellow for a Fox as well. But thankfully, no crashes or anything, which was good to get through these couple of days unscathed.
Dreyer and Reinbold do love a good catastrophic engine failure, don't they? Because they had Hunter A last year as well. So it's a strangely recurring theme. Like I don't think it's got anything to do with the team, but it's just funny that they've had 2 catastrophic engine failures in a row.
Hunter Ray had his catastrophic engine failure on carb day, went to the backup car for race day and nearly won. So
it's interesting we mentioned Dreyer and Reinbold, because we saw the news this week that they partnered with Rinus VK for the Indianapolis 500. Obviously, VK with Pinkas Hollinger Racing, which is slightly surprising. We obviously see a lot of alliances between teams. You've got Andretti and Dale Coyne Racing. We've got Ganassi and Meyer Shank Racing. We obviously previously seen Hunkos partner with McLaren for a couple of months previously. But this was one that I think was a bit out there to us. It was not one that we really did expect. VK's running a Weedbush car, which I believe was what Hunter Ray ran last year as the primary sponsor. So sharing sponsors there, obviously sharing of technical information. And ultimately, these are 2 very small teams. Hunkos is often regarded as one of the smallest, if not the smallest operation in the series. Dreyer and Reinbold, this is their only race every year. And ultimately, having more data from more cars is only going to help their efforts. Both obviously beginning to win their first Indianapolis 500. So VK, obviously a very talented driver. Dreyer and Reinbold showed a very good race pace last year. Hunkos showed pretty encouraging qualifying pace last year. So combine the 2, and they might be in for a quite strong affair. So yeah, interesting partnership there, which one we didn't really see coming, but definitely worth a note just in the lead up to this test.
I mean, I'm not going to admit and say like, oh yeah, I thought this was going to happen. But actually, after our chat with Daly last week, kind of, it makes a lot of sense, because obviously he is in a reserve capacity still with JHR, purely to keep Arco, which is his partner, in the sport. And, you know, he mentioned in our chat that it's pretty painful seeing that sponsor on VK's car when he's done all the work to bring that sponsor. So there is kind of that link between Daly being quote unquote reserve driver, as much as it is purely kind of a commercial thing with JHR, and then him obviously competing in the 500 with Dreyer and Reinbold. So there is that link, and he did indicate there was going to be some cross-pollination in terms of sponsors. Arco's obviously on his car, and I think it's on Harvey's car as well, while being a JHR sponsor. So that kind of does make sense in a weird way, that relationship, just because of the common factor of Daly kind of having an involvement with both parties. So it doesn't feel like it's ridiculously out there. It's also not something I saw coming, and I think VK was asked about it on the YouTube stream / track PA stream, whatever it was being broadcast, and he said, I mean, really actually the most helpful thing with it is purely the fact that they can all go and do a traffic run, all 4 of them together, if they wanted. So I don't really know the extent necessarily of that partnership. That's maybe something to have a look into, but I wonder whether it's actually mostly commercial, just with kind of that, as I mentioned, the common factor of Daly. Be interested to just dig a little bit more into that one. As we kind of mentioned, there haven't really been like tons of talking points. I think actually Katherine Legge failing to run the refresher program on the first day is probably one of the bigger ones. We'll get onto that actually at the end, just to link nicely into our chat with Mike. But I think one other thing that kind of gained a bit of traction on social media was Mick Schumacher's comments after the first day of running, and it all stemmed from a video with Marshall Pruitt, and he shared very similar sentiments when he came into press after that first day of running. And basically the kind of the short and curlies of it is the fact that he said he just wasn't, he wasn't like blown away or super impressed or anything by the speedway. And, I think he said that actually he was more impressed by the short ovals, because I think, he alluded to the fact that IMS is a very big facility, very clear, 4 different corners, whereas obviously the short ovals are like bull rings almost, and it's all very, very fast paced. And I think his impression was that they almost felt quicker and more, maybe more different to him in some ways because of just the real like frenetic nature of them. And I think a lot of diehards on the internet took it the wrong way as him almost disrespecting the Indy 500, which I don't think is right. I think there's a few points to make on it. Foremost, that, I mean, this first day was very much just building up to speed. He was doing his rookie orientation program, which obviously requires him to run a little bit slower, and it kind of helps him gradually get into it. It's not like he's going and, pinning the throttle like the veterans, and, by the time he gets to turn 3, he's flat. Like, he's taking it very gradually, he's trimming very gradually, and he even noted, like, by the time it gets to qualifying, his impression may have completely changed. When the grandstands are full on race day, his impression will probably completely change of the event. But this was kind of purely something he was talking about on the track. And I've seen loads of people saying like, oh, she'll come back to bite him. The Speedway never forgets. But do you want him just to lie and say like, oh, it's amazing, it's the greatest thing ever? Ultimately, this guy is, he's still young. He's still only 27 years old. But he's a seasoned professional. He's been in Formula One. He's been in the World Endurance Championship. He's been around the block in motorsport. He's had motorsport around him, his entire life. Like, it's almost like natural that this guy's a professional. He's not young, and he said himself like he doesn't want to be treated like a novice or a rookie this year. He's done plenty of oval. If this was the first oval he'd ever done, maybe he would be more awestruck. But he's done Phoenix. He's driven at Homestead. He's driven at Gateway, and I just think it's natural. He's a professional. Like, he shouldn't be overawed by it. Like, if he was getting really overawed and like, oh my god by it, I'd kind of be concerned, to be honest. So I think the honesty is refreshing, to be honest. I think his perception will change as the month goes on when you get the qualifying boost, when you see the event, because this is purely just a first impression of driving the track. This isn't him disrespecting the 500 like people seem to be insinuating is the case.
Yeah, I've not got really much to add on that. Yeah, people might as well be honest, because that's what gives us interesting perspectives. It's much more interesting as a consumer hearing people say that honest opinions rather than everyone just saying what people want to hear, which ultimately isn't particularly interesting at the end of the day. But yeah, it will gradually build up. Like, it starts very quiet at the open test because there's not a huge amount of fans. The speeds aren't very high. You're just kind of ticking boxes more than anything else. But as you say, kind of as you wind up into May, where the festivities start to kick in, you start getting the speed increase a little bit, you start getting into more consistent race running. Ultimately, his perspective is going to change, but his perspective of the race is ultimately going to be very short-minded, so because he just doesn't have that experience. And like, I can see why, as somebody's having overs for the first time, that somewhere like Phoenix might be a little bit more crazy, because you're turning for a lot longer period of time. Ultimately, probably the G-forces are significantly higher than somewhere like Indianapolis, for example. And a lot of the other guys who kind of go through the ladder system would have experience racing on these ovals and kind of acclimatise them. So when you get to Indianapolis, it's, oh my goodness, this is a whole different sense of speed, whilst maybe that isn't quite the case with Schumacher just because of the environment he's coming. So I think, again, it's 2 days, it's probably a bit quick to judge. And I think a lot of drivers, it's not necessarily the track that makes the Indy 500 what it is, it's the event and the festivities and the traditions and the significance surrounding it, which makes it what it is, not the 2.5 miles that the Brickyard is.
And obviously, like, throughout the whole campaign, and I remember Louis Foster saying this to us last year after his first kind of 500 run, throughout kind of just reflecting on the entire month, that there's so many ups and downs. And ultimately through that, you have to be very level-headed and very stable from that emotional standpoint. So I personally think this is a great approach from Schumacher, really. And it's interesting, another point that was made, I think it was put to him in the press conference, that Graham Rahal had kind of really credited where his success at Phoenix came from, was his smooth driving style. And Schumacher said that ultimately a lot of that comes from what you were required to do in Europe on the Pirelli rubber, which wears a lot more than you tend to get in IndyCar, and actually maybe where he struggled a little bit on road and street courses early this season has come from the fact that he's having to really push hard, and that's maybe not what he's been used to. Whereas on ovals, actually, you're rewarded for that sort of smoothness. And maybe because that is his style, it doesn't feel like such a leap doing this, driving in Indianapolis, where that is kind of what's rewarded, that real kind of measured driving style, that real, just smoothness. So, geez, I think people have just overreacted. I get it, and I get why people are so passionate about this event, and it's great, but I don't think anything that he said was disrespectful, personally. And come at me if you disagree. But
that's a really funny statement, because in recent races, who has been the quickest guy in short ovals?
Rasmussen.
I don't think you'd use the terms controlled and smooth when we refer to Christian Rasmussen on ovals.
Well, that's funny, that actually. Yeah, that's really interesting. I suppose it's two contrasting things that can work, because I mean, and I guess as well, like, the guy who's winning on road courses is not exactly like brash and kind of. I guess what Palou good at is being smooth while also pushing. That's why he's so great. But yeah, that's interesting. But this isn't my statement, by the way. This is Graham Rahal, who supposedly said this. But that is interesting. Kind of great about IndyCar. Multiple different ways that you can win.
Ends of the spectrum. It's like.
Yeah,
just smooth and calm, and that's just Rasmussen's on board. It's like the horseshoe, where like maybe being a bit in the middle of aggressive and smooth is the bad, and eventually comes back around. And you've got to be really smooth, or you've got to be super aggressive, like Rasmussen.
That's interesting. Well, we've taken on a tangent. We should probably get on to.
Well, I wanted to comment one more thing about him not being wanted to be treated as a rookie. I mean, he's got to be, because he's got to milk the cow. That is the ultimate rookie treat. He's coming from Europe, all these guys must think it's so bizarre.
Like, I know, he's gonna find this so strange.
I wonder if he's heard about it yet.
Oh,
because Larson didn't hear about it until quite late on, so I don't know if he would have heard about it. Gosh, maybe it's a surprise. We'll have to find out of him the first day of running what he thinks of milking the cow.
Oh my god. Yeah. I'm very intrigued by that.
To be fair, all the rookies apart from Abel are European based, Hauger and Collett, so that might be entertaining to ask how the cow milking will go. So we'll have to find out.
If I'm to read into it, I think Jacob will embrace it because he loves Indy. Collett will be pretty nonplussed because he's very kind of just calm. Hauger, I think, will love it because he just seems
I think he'll find it really funny.
I think he'll find it really funny. And Schumacher will just be utterly bemused.
But do you remember last year we had that whole award saga about how he never milked the cow? He did eventually, obviously. But I wonder if anyone else has got to catch up this year.
That's a good point, actually. Anyone else in that kind of COVID year? VK?
What year? Maybe... was? Oh, no, because he didn't qualify in 2019, did he? So 2020 was the year. You're so right. VK. Hello.
That was his rookie year. Maybe it's worth posing that to award. Palou didn't milk the cow, and he's gone.
Sato didn't milk it, and he won twice. So that goes way back. Because when did this start?
Well, that's interesting. But yeah, Palou wins the year that Pato milks the cow. Maybe if Palou milks it this year, then Pato will win. I don't know. This is taken. We're supposed to be recapping the Open test here.
But who's going to hear about milking cows on an IndyCar podcast? So anyway, let's go on to our good friend Jacob Abel, because we did an Indy 500 kind of update a couple of weeks ago with all the entries, and by that point, Jacob Abel had been not confirmed, but everybody kind of knew it was going to happen. It was a pretty open secret by that point, but obviously since then he has been confirmed. But from our end, obviously a great friend of the show is Jacob, and I guess from his side, it's quite relieving heading into the month of May, where you just don't have that threat of being bumped like was the case last year. And one thing I probably do want to find out from him is, does that approach change? Like, do you focus now more towards the race than just trying to make the field in that right qualifying speed? Now they know that, so it'd be interesting to kind of catch up with him on that. But obviously, test was a pretty smooth couple of days, which is ultimately very, very important. And yeah, just good to see him back. Like, you always feel a bit bad for a rookie who doesn't get their shot at Indy 500, and where they have one full season and don't get another chance. It's quite obviously disappointing that the one race that effectively really, really there for don't get to make. So really, really good to see Jacob Abel back, and obviously being a good friend of the show, that is just an extra plus.
Yeah, you look pretty comfortable in the test, and yeah, I think you're very right. He will be relieved that there's no bumping, and it's funny, already in the Open test, I've kind of, I don't know, you almost watch it in a different way. Like, you always throughout, and I guess less so in the test, more so when you get to practice in May, you watch it kind of knowing that there's constant possible jeopardy, and it is a shame not to have that jeopardy factor. But at the same time, he will be one person who is extremely relieved that, I think he can kind of really just progress up rather than, like last year with Coyne, he immediately had the pressure of like really having to figure out the speed because he was constantly on the back foot. Whereas this year, if he's on the back foot, there's no kind of frantic panic to sort things out. And he knows that, ultimately, I guess it would be more gratifying if he, qualified for his first 500 by making the field if there were 34 or 35 cars also trying to qualify. But he's going to live out his dream in the next month. And I just think that's awesome. I think he didn't get a fair crack last year with Coyne. I think there were a lot of issues there. And it wasn't a season that was representative of his ability. So I'm glad, while obviously not full-time, he's getting another chance to prove himself and has a good run with his family team as well, which was obviously really cool. Then, you don't know what sort of springboard that can possibly provide. So good guy, good talent. And it's just nice to see him get this opportunity to redeem himself, so to speak. Not that, he did anything wrong that he needs to redeem himself for, but just as to right the wrongs of last year.
And then on the other side, we obviously had Katherine Legge announced as the all-important 33rd entry, which means the field is locked in from there. We're not expecting any more entries, which is, as you said, a little bit of a shame, but the most important thing is you get that 33 number. Anything from there is always a bonus. But great to see Katherine Legge back, obviously serving as a role model to a lot of people, being obviously a female in the Indy 500, bringing back that ELF sponsorship as well in a very sleek-looking car this year, which is fun to see. And HMD Motorsports, as we said earlier, have partnered with Foyt Racing for this entry, so a combined entry there, which means more personnel, more resources, as you'll hear from Mike Maurini a little bit later, into kind of how that operation works in between the two teams. But yeah, great to see Katherine Legge back. Obviously, she really, really impressed in that year she did with Rahal. Even the Coyne year wasn't too bad when they were in a little bit of trouble. And obviously, that was a bit unfortunate. She had that engine failure there. But yeah, I mean, as you'll get onto in a minute, Archie, pretty difficult test for her. But ultimately, the boxes that needs to be checked were checked, which is the most important thing leaving these 2 days.
I suppose this is actually an entry in the same vein as Abel as, I mean, I don't want to kind of take the words out of Mike's mouth. I want to kind of let him do the talking. But, they will certainly be relieved because this came together less than a week before the open test. They literally had 4 full days of preparation. And by full days, I mean full days. Like, they were putting 20-hour days in to get this car just in a runnable position. So they will be also relieved that they can kind of prove themselves for, from an HMD standpoint. And this is officially an HMD entry. They are, in a separate garage area to Foyt, for instance. They want this to be an opportunity that proves that they are a caliber that, is befitting of possibly featuring more in IndyCar in the future. And without the pressure of, with the possible bumping and fighting to make the field, they'll be able to kind of prove themselves in a lower stakes way, but also obviously coming in as a serious underdog. That, I mean, they're in a position with such short notice putting this together. Like anything that's not like around the last few rows for qualifying, finishing, top 25 would probably be an achievement, because it's been so, people prepare for a year for this race, and they've got mere weeks. Like they literally have had half a week before getting on track for the test. And yeah, as you alluded to, and we'll get onto it now, it was a rocky first day. It was unfortunate. And, Mike said to us, as you'll hear, like, issues were going to be inevitable during this test. But unfortunately, they had a clutch problem that denied Legge running. They didn't initially run the 10 a.m. install opportunity just because they wanted to make sure they were properly ready. And then they ran their install lap at the start of the ROP refresher opportunity, and discovered a clutch issue, and then there was a minor braking problem, and that meant Legge couldn't run her refresher, and you have to get through what is called phase 2, which is running, I think, 15 laps between 210 and 215 miles per hour. She didn't do that. That meant she wasn't eligible to then complete the final phase in the all-car session. Actually, everyone else completed their rookie orientation or refresher, other than, I think it was Hauger, in that allotted time. Hauger then went on to complete his getting to the necessary phase and completing his in that final session on Tuesday. But yeah, Legge wasn't eligible to run, which meant 4 hours of lost track time, 4 hours of gained preparation time, though. So you can kind of I guess there's definitely a silver lining to it, given how hastily prepared this entry was, but not super ideal. She lost another 2 hours in the morning on Wednesday, or the initial 2 hour session on Wednesday, because they slated her refresher in the lunch break, but ultimately got past the necessary phase, was able to finish it in the all-car session, and they are up and running, eliminating any kind of big issues, which is what this test is for, especially, as a one-off entry that was put together so quickly. So, yeah, it was a shame, but not a catastrophe in the end.
Well, the good news is they're not going to be exactly short of practice come May, are they? So they'll have some time to kind of iron out those bits when they get to May. I mean, it's 4 or 5 days of straight practice. I'm sure they'll be fine in the end. But who's better to speak about the entry a little bit more than the individual who's running this entry, HMD Motorsports and team president Mike Maurini, who's also serving as a spotter for David Malukas at this year's Indy 500. So here's Mike, a little bit of segment about spotting, and Katherine Legge. So this is a really good listen. We're here after the first day of the Indy 500 Open Test. We've got a very special guest on as Mike Maurini rejoins the show. Obviously, a bit more interest in the Indianapolis 500 from Mike and HMD Motorsports this year, fielding Katherine Legge in a partnership with AJ Foyt Racing. And Mike, just give us a reflection on kind of the first day of the Open Test. How has it been, obviously, on Katherine's side, but obviously you're spotting for David Malukas as well. It's obviously a busy day for you.
Yeah, I guess it was good, bad both ways. So, on the HMD side, Katherine's car got unloaded from the AJ Foyt Racing trailer, I think on Thursday last week, where, most teams get a year to prepare for this race. We basically had 5 days. And it was set up as a road course car. It was only half a car. There was no engine in it yet or anything like that. So it's just a matter of pulling all the pieces and parts together to make the whole program work. And we knew coming into this, we're going to have issues. There's going to be stuff that you forget. There's going to be, stuff that's overlooked. So went out there for the install session, didn't do the install at 10 o'clock. Just wanted to make sure that everything was 100% perfect. Went out there. Obviously, everything wasn't 100% perfect at noon. We were able to finally get on track and do one install lap, but there was a clutch issue. So I had to come in and fix that. And then there was a small issue after that, which was just regarding the brakes. But not that there was no brakes, just that there was a braking issue when she came into the pit box. So that had to be fixed just because for a safety thing on track, just in case something happens in front of you. So at that time, the session was over. So tomorrow, she will have to do the phase 2 of the refresher program. They're going to give us time, I think, between noon and 1. And then once phase 2 is done, you can run phase 3 with everyone else that's running. So that's the plan for tomorrow. We're going to try and push and see if we can do something before the session starts at 9. If not, it will be at noon. But that's we needed the extra day. We just didn't have the extra day. So now we have it. So it's perfect. And then on the other side, obviously, I came into the track today in an HMD shirt. I'm leaving the track in an HMD shirt, but in the middle, I was back and forth between HMD and Penske. So a spot for David I'm in the turn 1. So I see everything from the exit of turn 4 to the apex of turn 2. Then there's another spotter in turn 3 that does the opposite end of the track. But yeah, it was a good day. Did a lot of traffic running, did some solo running. Obviously, everybody's running not full race power or anything like that. So our qualifying power. So it's hard to tell where you were, but I think David was happy. It was a good day all around.
The main thing is obviously this partnership where you have HMD Motorsports and AJ Foyt Racing, as we found out on Monday that Katherine Legge would be entering in the 33rd entry, the all-important 33rd entry for this year's Indianapolis 500. So just give us a timeline about how that deal came around from your end and AJ Foyt Racing's end, and kind of what the timeline was of putting this deal together with Katherine.
Yeah, maybe about, sorry, it's a little loud where I am, but maybe about a month ago, it was there was some mention that Colton Herta was going to be the 33rd entry, and at that point, there was not even a talk about this program. So to just put in perspective how far behind, we know like teams on June 1st, they start for next year's Indy 500. So it's definitely one of the biggest undertakings as an organization that we've done, but obviously. We have some crew here, engineering crew, but AJ Foyt Racing has also had some of their 4 and 14 car crew assist in getting everything ready, but obviously they can't take away from their own program. So we actually tested in Mid-Ohio before Long Beach. Indy Next was testing on the Tuesday, Wednesday. I was at the test on Tuesday night. I was driving from Mid-Ohio to back to Indianapolis to fly to Long Beach. And Henry and Larry and I were on the phone, and we had a conversation at that point. And it was like, yeah, there's all this stuff in place, so let's try and go ahead and do this. From that point forward, there was several meetings that had to happen in Long Beach. There was a lot of sign-offs that had to happen by other people higher up than I am, or higher up than Larry is. So, and that finally came. Basically, I flew home on Monday. We tested again in St. Louis on Wednesday, and Wednesday morning is when we said, okay, we're going to do this. So, Wednesday morning. Unfortunately, AJ Foyt Racing's Kyle Collette was testing Thursday, and I believe the car that Katherine is driving was in that trailer at St. Louis. So it didn't get back to the shop till Thursday night. So it was a long weekend. I think there was 3 20-hour days, and then yesterday as well at the track. So, but yeah, it's been an undertaking, but we want to be an IndyCar. HMD wants to be an IndyCar, so we're proving that, hey, it doesn't matter what the task is, we're going to try and do it.
And obviously, this is HMD partnered with Foyt. So can you just kind of help people try and understand a bit in terms of the balance between the input of kind of both of those parties and their personnel, and kind of how you go about selecting the people to be on this car as well? Just, yeah, what's that balance between HMD and Foyt in this entry?
Yeah, so this is an actual HMD Motorsports entry. HMD is registered as an IndyCar team. We entered the car. So I think between us all, there was no way to do it. One of us couldn't do it by ourselves. So from our side, we supplied a lot of the pit stuff. Obviously, we have hospitality walls and flooring and that kind of stuff. We supplied 3 engineers. So we have a race engineer who's Mike Reggio. Alex Vetti is Josh Pearson's engineer from last year. Salvador de Alba's engineer this year. He's doing performance engineering. And then we have Nick Woloshin here, and Zach Mollahan will tag team the systems engineer and DAG side of it. Luke Varley, who was David's coach last year, or for the past 10 years, is the managing director at HMD. So he runs the people. He's going to be the team manager. He's running the team because I'm obviously not here. And then we have 4 or 5 crew on the car, and a mix of some of AJ Foyt Racing's crew. Obviously, when you come into the Indy 500, there's more entries here than normal. So every team's hiring people. Every team was able to hire their people October, November last year when they knew they were going to do this. We obviously couldn't pull the trigger on that until last week, or a week ago. We started trying to find the proper people. So we have some fill-ins right now at the test who won't be here for the race weekend because there was some people who have a lot of IndyCar experience that couldn't get away from work or anything for this test. So on the engineering side, it's all communication with AJ Foyt Racing. So we have our own setup here in the garage. AJ Foyt Racing has their own setup in their area. But at the end of the day, all the engineers and drivers go together to debrief. Same within the morning. So it's a completely shared and open concept across the 3 entries.
And obviously, you've kind of mentioned the very short notice at which this was put together. So what in that very short period of time has kind of gone into preparing this entry? And I guess what is the impact of that against teams that have, as you say, been preparing all year round?
I mean, it's just like, obviously the fit and finish of the car is not what a speedway car should be, right? Like if, you're looking for half a tenth of a mile an hour, or a tenth of a mile an hour, we're probably not there because we're piecing together bodywork and floor and stuff like that. So, but I think over time, obviously we're not racing today, we're racing 5 weeks from now. So there's a fair bit of time to try and get ready for that. Obviously not a year's worth of time, but we continue to work at it, and there's a group of dedicated people here that want to succeed. So like we know, is qualifying on pole in the cards? Probably not. Is winning the race in the cards? I mean, you never know. As Indy 500, anything can happen. But I think at the end of the day, Catherine's best finish is 22nd. If we can best that, then that's a win for all of us. But for us, it's we want to show that, hey, we can be here and we can do this. So.
As we know, for this race, there's a lot more drivers interested in participating than there are seats available for the race. So ultimately, why did you decide to choose Katherine for that CV Fair Penske Entertainment? I'm pretty happy with that decision. So what made you pick Katherine as your driver?
I think at the end of the day, there was Katherine was already chosen as the driver. There was a driver that had sponsorship and a big brand behind her. She's a female in motorsports. The car came from Foyt. So it wasn't so much choosing a driver, it was the assembling of the program to try and make the driver, or try and put the driver into the race. So, it's weird because once this was announced yesterday, I probably had 2 or 3 drivers, some in Indy Next, some not in Indy Next, some, in Europe, that have contacted me and said, hey, if you're going to do this next year, let me know. Like, we have budget, we have sponsors. So it's good. It's good to have your name out here. And I mean, I've been in the Indy 500 for 20 straight years. So now I'm here in a whole different role.
And you could have always said, like, no, we're not ready for this. This is a massive undertaking. So when this arose, why was this something that you wanted to be involved with at this very point in time?
I mean, I want to be an IndyCar. That's me personally. I know is really not in my vocabulary. In Indy Next, we started with 2 drivers. We ended up running 10. So it's not like, drivers came and we said, no, you can't race with us. We figured out a way to do it. And we're kind of in the same boat here. It's, we have a, 80,000 square foot shop. It's all nice, all decked out for IndyCar racing, but we can't get there right now. So, the best way to do it was to, partner with a program or be involved in a program that's at the Speedway already, that has, there's history here from that program. So, and I mean, the IndyCar is like the coolest racing on earth. So, whether we're here in the garage or I'm here spotting, or I don't have a job, I'm still gonna be here. So, to be here and get paid is a bonus.
And kind of following up on that, and you've obviously had this to us before, that ultimately IndyCar is the goal for HMD Motorsports. But obviously, you've got some news this week that it's only going to be the chartered entries that are going to be allowed access to races outside of the Indianapolis 500. So, from that perspective, does it make your routing even more difficult? And kind of what opportunity maybe could this race provide HMD for maybe expanding your goals of reaching IndyCar later on?
Yeah, someone asked me what were my thoughts. Someone this morning asked me what were my thoughts about the announcement that was coming out, and I said, there's 2 different ways that you can react to it. One is, frustrated and annoyed, which is, yeah, okay, that's great. But the other is, you have to look at from Roger Penske's side, right? He has a group of teams that are invested in the series already that he needs to protect, and this is the best way to protect them. So he's driving the value of those programs up, which is great. On our side, we look at it as, okay, maybe we can't get in, but how can we adjust to better those teams or help those teams? Or maybe we turn into more of a focused driver development program that actually has partnerships with multiple different teams to place drivers in certain spots. Maybe they're a junior driver for Young Coast Racing or Chip Ganassi Racing, and they're racing with HMD, just like the Red Bull junior drivers are racing with different teams over there, or the McLaren junior drivers are racing with different teams over there. So, with that being said, we are here at the Indy 500 in the IndyCar series, which is pretty cool. So there's opportunity maybe for the future. There's other teams that, add entries for this race. Maybe they'll call on us in the future. Speaking with Larry, even before we, last week on Wednesday or Thursday, I'm like, hey, if we do this next year, we should start in 5 weeks for next year. So I think there's opportunity that way. There's also obviously a Chevy charter that's not spoken for. They haven't assigned that to any sort of team yet. There's Ed Carpenter Racing, there's Jean-Claude Hollander Racing, there's AJ Foyt Racing that can all add cars. There's Able that could add a car. There's HMD now. So we kind of, I guess, inadvertently throwing our hat in the mix for that. And I think the way that we're doing it is if we're partnering with Foyt here. And that Chevy charter, if Chevy does call upon us and say, hey, we want to support HMD, or we want HMD to support us in our project, how do we do this? I think we have a plan or a route that we can actually go now.
And just finally, and it kind of feels a bit insane to ask this now, but at what stage do you kind of decide that you want to do this again next year? Does that happen anyway? Does it happen kind of depending on how this year goes? What's the thought process?
I've already decided. I think if we can, if we can pull this off this year and do a decent job, like I said, if we don't qualify last, or we have a best Katherine's, or better Katherine's best finish, that's a win. But to me, I think the sport and the Indy 500 and IndyCar to me is like a drug, right? So this is probably one of the most expensive drugs in the world, but it's keeping everyone off the streets, and it's a good time. So to me, I'm already committed for next year. It's just a matter of the puzzle pieces are on the table. You just got to build it.
Awesome. We really appreciate your time, Mark. We appreciate you've been very busy today being a team manager and a spotter. So we appreciate your time you've given us today. And this is kind of the start of the build up to May. So we're very much looking forward and to racing getting underway.
Yeah, I think it's this whole thing is just part of the story. Like today, clutch issue and stuff like that. It's just part of the whole story for the next 5 or 6 weeks. So this is the chapter 1, I guess.
So that's Mike Maurini. Obviously, a big thanks to Mike for his time. Obviously, came on earlier in the year. If you want a whole kind of inside HMD Motorsports, Mike's really, really good on this show and gives some great insight all the time. So that's definitely worth a listen if you haven't listened to that episode before, if you want a little bit more about HMD Motorsports, kind of how they came from their early beginnings to running a car at Indy 500 today, which is pretty awesome. And that's it for our roundup of the open test. We have one more episode before IndyCars hit the Indianapolis road course for the Soncio Grand Prix in early May before the actual 500 running gets underway on the Tuesday. So stay tuned. We don't fully know what it's going to be yet, but stay tuned. I'm sure it'll be a good episode, as every episode always is. And obviously this time a huge thanks to Mike for his time and what has been a very busy couple of days. So it's very kind of him to find a few minutes for us just to catch up. But for this time, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.